Yay! It's Wednesday. That's halfway through the week. Woo! Prince Spaghetti Day. Quick thing I want to touch on before we get into class material. In terms of drinks in the classroom, we do allow you guys to have drinks in containers that have like a screw top to it so that they won't spill. So make sure that that's the kind of drink you have. But the drink has to be in your bag. Don't let it like rest on the desk. The reason being, this room obviously fairly technology laden, and liquids in technology don't get along at all. So there's a possibility that we can damage stuff, which is not good. And then there's also the possibility that stuff could spill in the rug. And I don't know if you've been in some of the older buildings, and you notice they smell kind of funky in the rooms that have the rug, and that's because all it takes is one little spill, and everything in Florida gets moldy super fast. I don't know if you've noticed that, so we really have to be very careful about that kind of thing. So please keep those drinks away. You know, if you got to break it out, take a quick sip and then put it back, that's totally fine. I get it. 6-hour lab and 2-hour lecture is a lot, but we do have to try to protect the room. Does that make sense? So help me out on that front. This is more of a classroom than a cafeteria, so just try to keep that in mind, and nobody will get mad at me, because ultimately that's what's going to happen. If there's a mess in here or something goes wrong, they come to get me, and I am always to blame, apparently, for many things. So just make sure we do that, and then nobody gets in any, well, I don't get in any trouble. All right, so today we're going to be talking about actually some really fun stuff. We're going to be talking about, again, a little bit of picking up where we were with the whole, hey, let's work smarter, not necessarily harder. Let's figure out what we can do to speed things up. And I've got a couple of fun little tricks for you to learn. And we are also going to delve into image planes. I'm going to show you guys how to find or determine the difference between good and not as good reference, and then show you how to take images and bring them into Maya so you can make your own image planes, which will allow you to model whatever you want to. You don't have to build just the stuff that we ask for. You can build whatever you wish on your own time, and hone your modeling skills by building the stuff that you're really excited to build, not necessarily beer bottles and screwdrivers. So that'll be pretty cool. And then, then we're going to delve into materials and shaders, which is sort of the baby steps to texturing. So we're going to be talking all about materials and how we can adjust their attributes to change the colors of things and apply materials to objects. And that is going to be definitely an eye-opener for some of you. Very rarely do people delve into materials, so that's pretty fun. And it'll enable us to make our geometry more interesting to look at, not that dreary gray color that everything is. So that's pretty fun too. All right. Without further ado, get into today's stuff. Incidentally, there is a sign-in sheet, so if you haven't hit it, wait till the end, but come get it. But make sure you sign in. It's a really cool one. Section 1 is orange, and Section 2 is gray. All right. Speeding up our workflow. Hotkeys are a fabulous tool for speeding up your workflow. And I know I didn't go too heavily into them early on. Some of you have noticed that I probably avoided them to a certain degree. But the reason I did that was not because they're not important, but because I want you to explore. I think one of the dangers of learning a new application is to just, well, what are the hotkeys? I'm really not interested in anything else. Because what happens is it kind of narrows your field of view because all you know are the hotkeys. I want you going to menu sets and clicking and seeing all that stuff that's in there and start asking yourself, ooh, what does that tool do? Oh, what does that tool do? You know, like without the exploration, we don't have the interest. So initially we kind of shied away from the hotkeys, but are they an important part of your modeling workflow? Oh, yeah, definitely. You need hotkeys. You need to incorporate those. And the good news is hotkeys are easy for you to set up. You can make your own hotkeys because not everything has a hotkey because it would be impossible. There's not that many keys. So point being, Maya is set up infinitely customizable so that you can make the hotkeys you want for your particular workflow so you don't have to worry about other workflows. Does that make sense? And again, I know it seems like, well, how can a hotkey really save me a lot of time? It only takes me a second to do something. Well, if it takes you a second to do something and you do it 10 million times, that's 10 million seconds. Does that make sense? So if you can shave that in half to a half a second by using a hotkey, now we're talking about 5 million times. Does that make sense? That's going to save you time. Believe me, cumulatively, that's your buddy. So let's talk about how do I set up hotkeys for various things. All right, so first things first, let's wake up Maya. Hi, Maya. Isn't that cool how my interface, like it shows up with these big dark areas where none of my tools are there until I pass over them with my cursor? That's always a good time. All right, so here we are looking at Maya, and let's talk about some hotkeys. Here's one that we use quite a bit. In terms of the modeling process, we talked about it's a great idea periodically to delete history and freeze transformations. And freezing transformations is the idea that when I move an object, it generates what we call transformations. And it's at all zeros when it's at the origin. But if I want an object to live, if you will, somewhere else, I can say, well, actually, I'd rather this was its home starting position. So what I can do is go to Modify and choose Freeze Transformations. And what that does is it zeroes out all of the transformations except for scale, which it leaves at 1/1 scale, or its actual size. So this is its new position. So if I move the object again, and if I plug in all zeros, it goes back to that new position that I created. So freezing transformations is a nice thing to do. It's good for again, a house cleaning thing like deleting history. So there's a lot of good things that freezing transformations does for you. And that's something we do a lot. As I said, I save every 15 minutes, I delete history, and I freeze transformations. So in order to do that, I have to go to Modify, Freeze Transformations. But you'll notice there's no hotkey for that. And there are many tools that have hotkeys for them, and they'll list them for you, the ones that are built in. But for Modify, there's not a freeze transformation. So how do I set one up? Okay, because what I'd like to do is not have to go looking for it all the time. So to set up a hotkey, you go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, Hotkey Editor. And this is where all the hotkeys show up. So you choose Hotkey Editor, and the window opens up, and the keys that are sort of teal in color already have a job, and the keys that are gray do not. But you can, I mean, you might be looking at that going, wow, I've got almost nothing left to work with. You can do combinations of keys, like if you hold down Shift or Command, you know, using more than one key will free up more stuff for you to choose from. But let's say I want to do that freeze transformations thing. So first I have to choose my category. And what I'm going to do is use my menu items. So that gives me menu items as my things I choose from. And I see under Modify, I've got Freeze Transformations. And you see that there's no hotkey for that. Well, there's no hotkey for 8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in an 8 up here, give it that hotkey, and then I'm going to hit Save. So now 8 is the hotkey for Freeze Transformation. So if I move this cube somewhere and I press 8 on my keyboard, boom, I just froze transformations. I don't have to go looking for that. I don't have to go up into my menu set and find it. And like I said, if that's something you do again and again and again, that's really helpful if I can shave that time off by just going up here and hitting 8. And I know I've already done that thing that I want to do. So again, in terms of shortcuts, that's a tremendous one. And of course, if you have a hotkey that you don't want, you can just get it out of there. Boop. And then now the 8 is available again, and then you hit Save and Close, and then that's not a hotkey anymore if I press 8. Does that make sense? All right, hotkeys, woo! Save me some time. All right, so, oh, well, we just did that. So we made a hotkey. All right, let's take a look at the hot box. Now, the hot box is something that you've probably seen and maybe freaked out when you saw it because it's kind of scary. If you hold down the space bar, all of a sudden your screen fills with all these words, right? That's called the hot box. And what the hot box is basically all of the main menu items that you could look for. And so what you'll notice is, again, if you look at your modeling one, you see, you know, mesh, edit mesh, and all that kind of fun stuff. And those things are all up here, mesh, edit mesh. And what you can do is hold down the space bar and go right to the tool you want rather than having to go up to the top and go click it and look for the thing you want. And again, what's interesting about this is not only do we have the modeling menu sets up there, but we've also got some riggings up there. We've got some animation up there. So there's all kinds of stuff. I don't have to change my status line setting to the different jobs I want to do. I can actually just hold down the hot box and go exactly to what I want, again, and save me a lot of time versus having to go look for stuff. So the hot box is a great time saver for getting to the tools that I use a lot. And what you start to do is you start to remember where those tools are. And it's like you just hold down the space bar and just move your mouse, because you know it's going to the tool you want, because the hotbox will open up wherever your mouse is. So it is, by design, a shortcut to whatever it is you want. Does that make sense? Hotbox? Everybody hold down the space bar. You see that thing? Don't be frightened. It's your buddy. It can definitely speed things up. All right. Another fun little thing is marking menus. And marking menus work kind of like the hotbox in that there are some shortcuts to tools we use all the time. But they work with Command and the right mouse button or Shift and the right mouse button, and that will give you different marking menus. And again, the same idea is that these menus appear right where your cursor is, so you don't have to like go find stuff. So you just hold Shift and the right mouse button, and you go to tools that we use all the time. You know, multi-cut tool, insert edge loop tool, extrude tool. And again, here's some really fun ones down here that we go to again and again. And it saves us a lot of time if we don't have to go up to the main menu items to go look for this stuff. So it's super, super handy for our speeding up our modeling workflow. And that's what you're always trying to do. How can I speed my workflow? Because the modeling, as long as you do it, you're going to be getting better. You're going to be improving. But the question is always, how can I do this a little bit faster? Because that's definitely to your advantage to do that. All right, now, to incentivize your use of the marking menus in the hot box and the hotkeys, we have a reward system. So if Brian and I are walking around in the classroom and we find you guys using hotkeys, using marking menus, using the hot box as part of your workflow, you will be rewarded with stickers. That's right. I have in my possession Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stickers, and you get to pick the one you want. Not my choice, yours. And you can adorn your laptop and jeer your friends because they don't have as many stickers as you. And if you are in my digital classroom, I will send you an image of the turtle of your choice if I catch you guys using those marking menus, the hot box, or the hotkeys. They're a tremendous time saver. You really want to try to work that into your workflow, your way of doing things, because that will speed things up for you tremendously. Cowabunga, dude! So make sure you're using those things because they're super handy.
No, it's Booyaka-cha now.
Booyaka-cha? Uh-oh. Well, anything that's new, I haven't seen it. That's pretty much the way that works. If it's a movie that's out right now, yeah, I probably haven't seen it. Very rarely do I get to see a movie that's out right now. When it makes it to the Dollar Theater, I'll be back there with all the people with babies, and they finally get to go to the movies too. All right. So, marking menus. Let's get those in there. Let's do that thing. Any questions on these time-saving things that I'm talking about? How they work and their relative importance in your universe? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Key layout that is better for texturing.
interesting. A hotkey set. I have to look into that. I'm not aware that there's a such thing as a hotkey set, but that's interesting. But what I would say is that if you look across the top of Maya, my Maya's not up there, but if you look across the top of Maya where all those buttons are, right, those shelves and the shelf tabs, you can actually make your own shelf and put the tools up there that you want. So you can have a shelf that is texturing, and you can make your own buttons for whatever texture things you like, and then when you know you're texturing, you choose that shelf, and then those are right there. Does that make sense? So that I know for sure you can do. But building a set for hotkeys is an interesting idea, but I'm not sure if that's a thing or not. But I'll find out. That's a great question. Yep.
I noticed in the hotkey editor,
Mm-hmm.
up to the top that has a hotkey set, a little drop down.
Oh, there you go. That could very well be it.
So I think you have to, I don't know how that works, but I think you have to like add it to there.
I'm sure there's some kind of where you can, some kind of area where you can go, you know, plus or something, and it'll say, okay, what do you want to call it? And then you give it a name. So my question would be, how do you get to that set versus the other set? You know what I mean? But what I would say is, you know what I mean? Because you can't really tell it, okay, I want my texturing hotkey set. So I'm not 100% sure that would work. But what I would say is you could do a series of hotkeys for texturing, and they're all associated with the command key. You could do another set of hotkeys that are associated with modeling, and then those are associated with the shift key. Does that make sense? So you might have QWERTY for texture and QWERTY for modeling, but depending on whether you use shift or command, that would give you a categorization of the type of hotkey you've got. Does that make sense? That would allow you to do that for sure. Yeah, no, it's a great question. I love it. Anything that pushes the noodle, I'm down. Good? All right, awesome question. I'm glad you asked that, because now I'm thinking about it. All right, let's get into image planes. Image planes are the nuggets. These things make our lives so much easier. We model so much faster and so much more accurately through the use of image planes. They're an important part of our modeling world. Now, up to this point, we have been creating the reference images for you. We've been putting them into the scenes, and we've done all that work for you. The reality of the situation is that's not the way it goes. Normally, either you have to find the reference or create the reference, or it's given to you, and then you have to do everything. You have to set it up, you have to line it up and do all that stuff. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the importance of finding good reference, or the best reference you can, and then we're going to talk about how you bring your reference images into Maya so that you can build whatever the heck it is you want after this class. And by the way, if I show you how to bring image planes into Maya so that you can model your own stuff, do you think that's something I'm going to ask you to do? Yeah, you know I am, right? I'm going to make you guys do it, because when you guys get to your week 3 assets, all right, week 3, when you get to week 3, we are building level 3 assets. We give you the images. I give them to you, but I don't put the image planes in Maya. You have to do it. Does that make sense? You're going to have to create a project folder like we did the very first day. Remember, we learned how to do that? And then we're going to give you the reference images, and you're going to have to put them in a special folder so Maya can find them, and set up your own scenes. And that's the way it will be from now for the rest of your modeling life. Does that make sense? We did it for you to make it easier for you, so you had fewer things to worry about. But from here on out, that's going to be you doing that job. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Yeah, go ahead.
So for an image, does it connect to the plane, or does the image like try to select a background image?
That is an excellent question, and I'm hopefully going to answer it in the next couple of minutes. But let me know if I don't, because we'll come right back to that. All right, image planes. How do we build? How do we choose? First thing we need to talk about is what makes a good image plane. Now, in terms of images for use in image planes, the job of the image plane is basically a 2D representation of something that I would like to build in 3D, right? And we have that in our world right now. They're called blueprints. Blueprints are a 2D idea that will be built into a 3D idea, an object of some kind, right? So what makes a good blueprint is also what makes a good image plane reference. So when you're looking at reference images, finding images that have nice flat side views, flat front views, a nice top view depending on whatever it is you're building, all of those different views will help you to build the object better and faster. Now it's true you don't always have the best reference images. Sometimes it's a little bit of an angle. Sometimes, like we had with our mailbox, they've got two different textures on it. So you got to use what you can get your hands on. And some objects, there are just not that many reference images for. And believe me, I've been down that road where there's just too few images. And you've got to use your brain and what you know about how things in our universe work, as far as we know, and make those details happen logically. Does that make sense? That's where the real artist and the thinker come to play, because you've got to make up for whatever your reference is not giving you. Does that make sense? You still got to look good. That's on you. So, point being, this is ideal reference, and there's a company out there called theblueprints.com. I think it's the-blueprints.com, and it's a company that basically just provides reference images like this, really nice blueprints for you to model from. Mostly vehicles, planes and cars and tanks and stuff like that, which are pretty cool, but they're basically created to help you model from these things. And boy, let me tell you, if you want to get good at modeling, the best thing you can do is try to build a car. I say that to anybody who wants to become a good modeler. Cars are pretty much the hardest thing on earth to model, because if there's one vertex out of place, one edge in the wrong area, you see it across the surface of that thing, right? Cars are smooth. You can see when your car has a dent in it, right? As soon as you get your first dent, you're like, there it is. Who hit me with their door, right? It's the same thing with models. If there's anything that's off, pieces don't fit together, you see dents immediately. It is really hard. Cars require a level of perfection that is unbelievable. So if you want to become a great modeler, I always say try to make a car, because they are the hardest. Yeah? Mm-hmm.
Would it be easier to use the mirror?
Oh, absolutely, because cars exhibit a great deal of bilateral symmetry. You know what I mean? You got what's on one side is on the other for sure. So yeah, if you want to build that stuff one time and use the mirroring tools to help create more of that stuff, definitely. Yep. It's a good question. And honestly, a fairly safe bet when you're thinking about things that are built by human beings, because we tend to build with symmetry. We're symmetrical. The stuff we build is fairly symmetrical. It's cost effective to build things symmetrical because the sides are the same. You know what I mean? We tend to be that way. You know, interesting if we were like not symmetrical, would we build things that are not symmetrical? I don't know, maybe. You know, there's no mystery why everything in our world is a base 10, right? That's how many fingers we've got. If we had 12 fingers, everything would be base 12. But anyway, good reference images speed up the modeling process. Less than ideal references slow it down. And to be honest with you, you might be given a drawing that was drawn on a bar napkin. Here you go, make that thing. It's going to be harder, but it's still on you to do it. Make sense? Okay. So, again, there's different levels of quality to our reference images, but we still have to build it. But what we're going to talk about now is, how do I bring them into Maya? Because I want to do that. So I'm going to show you exactly how to bring some image planes into Maya, and then you'll be able to do it too. Now, in terms of the reference images, I've already found images for you, and they fit together really well. As I said, they were designed to go together, so it's going to be a super easy adjustment to get these image planes to get together, but that's not always going to be the case. Now, in terms of your reference images, something that you need to know about is where to put these reference images, because Maya needs to know where they are so Maya can bring them into your scene so that you can model against them. So in terms of your reference images, you will always put your reference images in your source images folder. Okay? And if you take a look at the project folders we've given you guys and all that fun stuff, there's a source images folder. There always is one. And that's where the images are housed within the project. Because anytime we want to bring those images into there, in fact, when we get to the texturing phase, That's where we put textures too. That's where Maya goes by default to find that stuff. So source images folder is a very important one in terms of you and Maya knowing where things are. So you want to make sure you set up your project folder correctly, set your project to that project folder so Maya can find those images and populate the image plane. Because if you guys remember when we first started, if you didn't set your project right, you got that pink box with the pink X in it. That's because Maya couldn't find the source images folder to find the image to populate. Does that make sense? We have to show Maya, this is the thing I want. Please put it in there. All right, so that's where all that whole setting the project comes from. It does the same thing with textures. Got to find the textures, so you got to put them where they can be found.
So with textures and source images,
Mm-hmm.
if you were to compress your like whole project and the source images like weren't in there, all your models would just have like the pink.
No, that's actually a good question, but it wouldn't take all the images and put them in there, because what you will find when you set up an image plane is you've told Maya this image plane houses this picture. So Maya will only take that picture and put it in that image plane. Does that make sense? Like this key only goes to my house. I can't get into anyone else's house with my key. That picture is supposed to go into that image plane. Now, if I change the name of the image plane while it's in the source images folder, Maya's not going to be able to find it and put it in there, because that image plane is set for this specific name. So if you just put an underscore in there or whatever, if you change that name in any way, can't find it. If you move that image somewhere else, can't find it. You don't set your project, can't find it. Does that make sense? Very easy. Machines are 1 and 0. Yes, no. Is it there or is it not? Does that make sense? And that's why it's kind of hard to work with them sometimes. You and I both know there's a lot of gray out there, right? Not to a machine. It's all yes, no gates. Yes, no. That's it. That's all they got to work with. Absolutes. So we got to learn to work with that. It's a good question, though. All right, so let's do image planes in Maya. So as I said, we put the image planes in there already for you, but you will have to put it in there in future endeavors, i.e. week 3. And incidentally, when you are modeling, if you're looking for more reference images of the thing you're modeling, take a look in the source images folder. There's probably more images in there than are actually in your scene. So there might be more views of whatever it is you're trying to build in that folder. So take a peek in there, because there's some other images. But here we are in Maya. And of course, what I want to do is set my project, File, Set Project, and we're doing an activity, so I choose my activity file folder and hit Set. Now, when it comes to getting those image planes into Maya, what you want to do is go to your panel menu. Actually, let me preface this whole thing by saying these are the steps for bringing an image plane into Maya. So you're going to want these. All right. So in terms of bringing an image plane into Maya, you go to your panel menu and you go to View, Image Plane, Import Image. All right. And again, you've got to do it through the panel menu. Now, you'll notice that because I set my project, what folder is Maya going to by default to find these images? Do you see the path? Source images. That's default. So that's where it's going to go. Does that make sense? I don't set my project, can't find it. So, set my project, and now I say, hey, Maya, I want to bring some pictures in. And then Maya goes, well, which picture from the folder of source images do you want? It's already asking me. And what I want you to do is choose the one called Mech Front and hit Open. All right? And what that does is it takes that image plane and it brings it right into Maya. So my image plane is now in here. It looks fabulous. I'm so excited. Now, in terms of my image plane, though, the image plane is basically a means of tracing, right? That's basically what we're doing when we're using an image plane. We are tracing an image, but we're using polygons to do it. So if I am tracing an image, right, is it going to be easy for me to model against this image? Can I model against this image? No, it's going to be really hard because you see how everything moves around so much? How many of you guys have ever traced anything? Come on, admit it. Everybody does it. All right, so we trace things from time to time. You know the keys to tracing are you've got to tape down the thing you're tracing, right? If it shifts while you're tracing it, it messes everything up. So the problem here is I move around and my image that I'm trying to trace moves around, it seems like. And that's because when I bring an image plane into Maya, it literally attaches it to the camera I'm looking through. So wherever that camera goes, the image goes. So if I bring that image into a perspective camera, I can't really use it as reference. Does that make sense? That's why we don't bring it into the perspective camera. What I want to do is bring it into an orthographic camera, a side view, a front view, a top view. That's going to work much better. So I'm going to undo this because it's a naughty no-no. All right, and instead I'm going to look at my orthographics. Now, the image I'm going to bring in is a front view image. So which camera do you think I should bring it into? Front view, right? I'm not trying to trick you. So I go to my front view camera. Process is the same. View, image plane, import image. Find my mech front and bring it in. All right, so my image is in there. Now, in terms of the placement of the image, this is going to help me out a lot, particularly when we're talking about our mirroring tools and the way they function. So what I want to do is, we've talked about this thick black line down the middle of my scene. What did we say this was? That grid line down the middle? It's the middle of my world, sort of the origin, right? Okay. And this thick black line, what did we say that was? You guys remember? The ground represents that flat grid that we see in the perspective view. It's the surface of the world I'm building. So what I want to do is I want to try to build this object so it's resting right on the ground. And if I build everything that way, when I import them all into the same scene, they're all on the ground. Does that make sense? They're already where they need to be. So what I want to do is move this image. And what I'm going to do is first I'm going to move it up. And what I'm going to try to do is line him up so his little feet, his toes, or whatever those things are right on the ground, even with the surface there. So I want it to just touch that surface. All right. And then again, as with many objects made by humanity, they exhibit bilateral symmetry. So what I want to do is try to divide this image in half, as close to in half as I can. So what I'll do is I'll pick a detail and then try to use that to help me find the halfway point for this particular image. And you can use your left and right arrows for little tiny moves if you need to. And so just try to get that thing lined up as well as you're able. And the more accurate, the better on that front. All right, so my first image is in. And you can see it in the perspective view. And you can see, do you see how his little toes are right on the ground there? It looks like he's ready to go walking. All right, so I got my front view in. So now it's time for me to do my side view. Which camera do you think I bring that into? Side view, right? No brainer. So I'm going to go over to my side view camera. Process is the same. View, image plane, import image. And now I choose my mech side and bring it in. All right, same thing. What's this thick black line? What's this one? The ground, right? And then this one is the middle of the world I'm building. So now I'm going to raise him up, right? And again, I want him to be right just touching the ground like my other view. And although front to back we don't always have bilateral symmetry, what I'm going to try to do is just sort of divide his mass more or less in half down the middle. All right? Now, you'll notice that my images are crisscrossing each other. And that's actually what we want. Because if my models are not crisscrossed, do you think it would make any difference when I try to model it if one image is bigger than the other? Do you think that would change anything? Yeah, it would totally throw off all the proportions of my model. The proportions in my front view have to match the proportions in my side view, or it's not going to go together. So what I want to make sure of is that my reference image of my side view merges nicely with my reference image from the front view. So what I will do is move my images around, right? So here I am, I'm looking at my front view, and I can see, oh yeah, here's the top of my front view, and here's the top of my side view, and they're a little bit off. So I might need to move this down a little bit so that this line and this line match up. I might have to scale it a little bit. I might have to make it a little bit smaller to get those lines to line up. But by whatever means, they need to line up. And then I can pick the next detail, like this curvature here should match this curvature there. So I can scoot that back, and yep, those line up. And then this little bit of circle should line up with this little bit of circle, because that will tell me, oh yeah, okay, these proportions are lining up nicely. I think I've got it. All right, so this is lining up, the next detail's lining up. Let me see where my feet are. Are they still on the ground or not? They're pretty close. Looks like they're off a little bit. So what I'm going to do is make my robot a tiny bit smaller, and then move him down so that my toes are touching like I wanted. And then I'm going to go back over here and see if these images are still lining up. No, they're not lining up there. So smaller was not the answer. Maybe I need to make it a tiny bit bigger. All right, now that's lining up good. Let me check my toes. Pretty good there. I think I might need to make it just a smidge bigger. That is a technical term. Feel free to use it. And then move it down. Okay, that's lining up nicely. Toes are on the ground. All right, that's a good match. Does that make sense? I'm literally messing with it to get them to line up nicely. And I cannot impress upon you enough how important it is to try to get those to line up well. The extra work that it takes to get this set up properly is well worth it. Because if your proportions are off when you start modeling, what's going to happen is you're going to be modeling, you'll be partway through the process, and you're like, hey, these things aren't lining up. This doesn't look right. These pieces aren't coming together. Ah! And guess what you have to do? Start again. Does that make sense? Gesundheit. So it is well worth your time and effort to make sure that those images are lining up nicely.
So when having a reference to make a 3D model, would you say is it easier to get a reference, or is it easier to make your own reference?
That's a great question. Is it easier to find reference, or is it easier to make your own reference? It really depends on the situation. And I'm not just dodging out of a question. If somebody tells you, I want you to build a B-17, we're doing an animation about the war over Germany and the process of where we were bombing them, and we need some models of B-17s for that. You're not drawing your own reference. You are finding actual legitimate reference, like photographs, you're finding blueprints, you're finding everything you can that is factual. Does that make sense? We do not have the liberty of doing what we want. Art for hire is I do what you want, exactly the way you want it, in exactly the time frame you give me. Does that make sense? So there is no flexibility. But if you say, oh, you know what, I'd really like to make a half centipede, half bat. Well, you're probably not going to find reference for that. But if you can draw your own reference for that and then build what you want to draw, because you can create that image, you can bring it into Maya just like a photograph or anything else. Does that make sense? So it is absolutely situationally dependent. Most of the time, they have a reference for you they want you to work with, or they have exactly what they want. That's not to say that sometimes they don't. A friend of mine was telling me one time a company came to him. He'd been modeling for these guys for years and doing an awesome job. And one day they came up to him and said, hey, listen, we need a space vehicle. It's got to be something that will carry troops from a vehicle in low orbit down to the surface of the planet and launch assault troops. And that's what we want. We don't really have an idea of what it should look like, so we leave it to you. So now, woohoo, and again, that's like, as an artist, make your own thing, which does not happen often at all. I mean, you have to have a severe level of trust for them to ask you to do that. But so they asked him to do that. But did he just make something up? No. What he did was he did research on vehicles that go to the battlefront and dispense troops. And he was looking at, you know, the Vietnam War, you know, M111s. He was looking at current operations, that really cool thing that the Marines have. There's a lot of sort of landing craft vehicles, World War II even, if you think about those things. I forget what they were called. But if you think about those things, there's a specific design that kind of follows those things. You'll hear people say form follows function. Well, what do I need it to do dictates what it looks like. So what he did was he looked at things like, you know, the troop carriers from the Vietnam War. He looked at current day troop carriers. He looked at Huey helicopters. He looked at Sea Stallions, you know, anything that would carry a large number of troops. And then he studied those things and he looked for the detail elements that he saw in each one of those. And then he designed his own landing vehicle, but it was built off of all these different pieces. And it was funny because when he showed me the vehicle he came up with, I was like, yep, I see the M111, I see the Sea Stallion. I could pick out the details from the various things that he was using as reference, because the accuracy and the believability comes from how real it looks. And if it looks really real, then it is very heavily steeped in reality, which is why when we model in this class, we start with reality, because you have to own reality before you can make plausible fantasy. Does that make sense? Because we've all seen models of spaceships where we're like, that's ridiculous. That doesn't even look cool or right in any way. Does that make sense? You want to avoid that like the plague.
So, even with trying to create our own kind of reference, it's good to look at like real life references to give us.
It's not good. I would demand it. Absolutely demand it. Because what happens is when you just make stuff up and there's no foundation in reality whatsoever for it, it doesn't look very realistic. And what it lacks tremendously is detail. You know, you look at people when they make up vehicles of the future, right? This is what cars will look like in the year 3035. And you look at that car and you're like, well, that's kind of a cool shape, but where are all the details? That's what's missing. That's why it doesn't look real. It looks like a concept. Does that make sense? Because they have no idea what the details look like, because they're not basing it in reality. Does that make sense? So, always reference. Even when you're making stuff up, you're using reference to do it. There's not really a time that is, the question is if somebody wants you to build a model, how long will they give you? And that's like saying, I want you to go on a road trip. How long will it take you to get where you're going? So if somebody asks you to build a model, there's a huge difference between, I want you to model the entire Battle of Waterloo, Wellington and Napoleon's troops, at the segment where Napoleon lost, versus, could you make me a pen top? You know what I mean? So some models, very quick and easy to build. Some of them, an eternity to build. Does that make sense? So it has everything to do with what they're asking for. But I can tell you, right out of the gates, it's always going to be an unreasonable amount of time to do whatever it is you want to do. And unfortunately, that's the reality of the situation. Anytime you have creativity by committee, everything takes longer. There's a lot of arguments. There's a lot of changes. And always when you get down to the deadline, okay, they've finally decided, now we have to make magic happen. Does that make sense? So we are always against the wall on this stuff. Compositors most of all, because they're at the end of everything. So everybody else has to finish before they can do their job. So it's even worse for them. And they have all the pressure. So it's all a crunch to make stuff happen. But they give you a timeline, and that's what you got to do, you know. And if that means you got to stay up late, you got to do it. You got to work extra hours, you do it, because it has to get done. Because there's no such thing as, yeah, I didn't really get it done. What? It's not even a thing. But that's a good question, and it just varies on the project. Anything else? No? Okay, good. So do we understand how to line up these image planes and get them in place? Okay. So now the next step is, I can't really model with these image planes crisscrossed in the middle like this. It's a little bit obnoxious, because if I'm trying to build this thing, you know, this mech, and I start making polygon primitives and I'm trying to line them up, you know, these pictures are kind of in the way. They're a bit obnoxious. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these images and I'm going to move them off the grid. And what I want to show you is, and you'll notice that when I'm grabbing them, I try to grab them by the corner. It's a little bit easier to grab them. Sometimes when you click right on, it won't let you. But if you grab it, sort of a marquee on the corner, it'll let you do it. But if you look, here I have selected the side view. And here's my side view over here, right? Now, if I move my side view, do you see how it gets smaller in my perspective view? Does it change size in my orthographic view? Watch it as I move it. Does it change size? No, it doesn't. Something getting smaller as it goes away from you is a function of perspective. That's a perspective window. Orthographic windows do not have perspective. So I can move that image wherever I want. It's not ever going to change size. That's why we bring image planes into orthographic views. Not only is it a better view to model from, but I can put that image wherever I want. It doesn't change size and that proportion that I fought so hard to get right. Does that make sense? So I move those things back and out of the way. Now you might say, well, does it make a difference which way you move it? If I move my image plane this way, keep an eye on this image here. If I move my image plane this way, you'll notice there's a point where I can't see the grid lines anymore, because my image is on top of my grid lines. If I move my image plane this way, the grid appears again. I like to keep the grid in front of the picture because it helps me line stuff up. So I prefer it there, but you don't have to do it that way. And again, I'm going to grab my front view and the same thing. This is my front view, and I'm going to move it this way. I get to keep my grid lines. This way, I lose them. So I like to keep my grid lines. Now, once I get them out of the way, something that I like to do, because you don't really use your image planes in this view, you really use your image planes here and here, not really there. So what I'll do is I'll go to my Show menu, and I will uncheck Image Planes, and it will literally hide them in that view so I don't see them anyway. Out of the way and hidden. And you might be wondering, well, if you can just hide them, why didn't you just leave them in the middle crisscross and just turn them off? Well, something I've noticed in previous versions of Maya, and I don't know if it does it in this one or not, but every once in a while, I'm trying to select vertices on the other side of the object, and it won't let me see them because the image plane is blocking it. That drives me crazy. So I just move the image planes out. I don't have that problem. No quirky, weird, why can't I select that component thing. Out of the way. All good. Make sense? Okay, now I'm ready to model. I can use this scene file. You know, I'll save it right away because I got image planes in, everything's good to go, and this is my start file. And then from there, I start trying to model this thing. Make sense? Hell yeah? Good. And incidentally, anybody who wants to model the mech, I'll put it up for everyone to see if you do. Go ahead. Save scene as. Yep. Save scene as. And then what you call it, whatever you're going to do, my cool mech, or you know, whatever it is you're going to call it, whatever the name is supposed to be. And then when you save your files, it's going to go right to your scenes folder. Because again, you set your project, so that's where those files are going to go. If you don't set your project, Maya will save it to a default folder, whatever your project was previously set for, or someplace at random. So if you want to know where your files are, set your project. Make sense? Hell yeah? Awesome, good. All right, so this is image planes and how do we set them up in order to model stuff, because we got these reference images. So you can find your own reference images on the internet and model whatever you want. And again, it's very exciting when you can model your own stuff. And if you can draw your own reference and then model it, that is awesome. That's my favorite, when you can make up your own stuff, because then there's no limitation. If you can imagine it and you can draw it, you can build it. And that's pretty cool. And if your reference isn't so good, the stuff that you draw, find somebody who draws really well and ask them to draw a great reference for you. And you can model that. Also very fun. Make sense? Hell yeah? Awesome. Good. Okay. So let's take a look at the next fun little thing we're going to talk about, and that is materials und shaders. All right, materials. Materials in Maya are basically a way of determining how light behaves on a surface. And in our world, we think of materials in terms of their physical properties, like wood versus metal versus plastic. You know, what is this thing made of? You know, how much does it bend? At what point does it break? Can I freeze it? You know, that kind of stuff. We think about those properties when we talk about materials. But in Maya, materials don't really have physical properties unless we set them up through dynamics of some variety. So in terms of materials in Maya, the way Maya thinks about materials is, how does that surface react to light? Because light is something Maya can do. How does it look? Right? Now, in terms of the materials, materials have different properties. Some of these objects, light shines on them, and you can see a highlight on it, right? A very soft highlight. It's sort of diffused towards the edges, but I can read a light source in there. So that's a fairly reflective material. You know, how deep does that light go into that surface? Maybe we're talking about these grapes. Again, there's a nice soft specular highlight there. Light is going through the grape, and it actually goes all the way through. So how far does that light go through that material? Is it opaque? Is it transparent? You know, here's another material. It's super, like, light goes right through it. You can see there's a reflection on this other object of the first object. So light is going right through that and carrying light and color and the actual object's information, and it's transmitted on there. So, and you can see I've got very crisp highlights. I can actually see specifically where the lights are in the room based on this specular highlight on the surface of that material. So this is something that Maya can calculate very easily, and that's how Maya thinks of materials. How does it react to light? Translucent, transparent, opaque, very shiny, a little bit shiny. Does light go through it? To what depth does light go through it? Does it carry any color information with it? There's a lot of variables. And that's what Maya thinks about when Maya thinks about materials. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's take a look. In terms of materials, where are all these materials? All of the materials for any given scene are housed in a window called the hypershade. And the hypershade is a fun little window because it's got all this fun stuff in it. And basically, it houses the materials, the properties, or the attributes of the material. And attributes are a means of describing something. Like attributes could be tall, short, light hair, blue eyes, long toes. You know, these are all attributes of a person. Well, materials have attributes too. And, you know, color, transparency, ambient color. So there's a lot of variables in terms of how does a material behave. Now, in Maya, up to this point, everything we've been building and everything we've been working with is made of what we call Lambert number 1. Lambert number 1 is the default material in Maya. And Lambert is a very dry, sort of chalky material. It's kind of a lot like the acoustic tile over our head. Light does shine on it. It does reflect light to a certain degree, but I don't really see highlights on it at all. It's not very shiny. Sidewalks are a good Lambert material. Rugs are a good Lambert material. Not very reflective, but an important material. But anyway, all the materials are in the hypershade. And to get to the hypershade, you go to Window, Rendering Editors, Hypershade, and that will take you to the hypershade. And in terms of the windows that we are going to be using the browser and really the Create window. And something I want to let you know right off the bat, your Hypershade might look different. That's okay. All the windows you need in the Hypershade are under Window. So if you can't see the window you need, just go up there and click. And again, the two we're going to need is the browser and the create. So as long as you've got those two, you're fine. But let's take a look at the Hypershade and how it works, and then we'll do a little exercise. All right. Well, here, let's pop to this. Here's a little practice exercise that we can do. And we're going to be coloring up that object we made from the toolbox exercise. So first things first, let's take a look at the Hypershade. Okay, file, I'm going to just make a new scene here. If you go to Window, Rendering Editors, Hypershade, this opens up the Hypershade. And again, you'll see that there are 3 default materials in there. There's Lambert number 1, a particle shader, and the shader glow shader. And these, again, are the default materials in Maya. You do not want to mess with these. I will say that again. Do not mess with the default shaders in Maya. Bad things happen to good modelers when they mess with the default shaders. If you want to make a new material and mess with that, please, by all means, do so. That is the preferred method. Now, in terms of the windows, I just wanted to remind you, again, this is the browser, this particular window, and if you go to Window, you'll see that all the different windows are in there. So if a window you don't have is not in there, you can get to that. So you can basically customize and build any window you want, or any configuration. But we're just going to need the browser and the create. Now, in terms of making a new material, it's super easy. These are the steps for the creation of a material. First, in the create section here, you find a new material. In this class, we only use Lamberts, and there's a really good reason for that in terms of your lighting and rendering times. So we're going to choose a Lambert and make a new one. So we just click on it, boop, and it makes a brand new Lambert. Now you will notice that within the Hypershade there's something called the property editor, and it basically gives you the attributes of the material you just created. However, I have noticed that when you play with the attributes in the Hypershade, it tends to crash Maya. So to avoid that, what I will do is come back to my main interface, and I'll just open up the attribute editor, which if you look at the little icons across the top here, it's the one that looks like a bunch of screwdrivers on top of each other. So you click that one, and that brings you into the Hypershade, and you'll see, oh, yep, that's the material I just made, Lambert number 2. So the next step is I name the material. Just like working in Photoshop, if you do not name your layers as you go, you end up with a huge collection of layers, and you don't know what's doing what. It's obnoxious, and it drives you crazy. So we name things as we go to avoid hell. So I'm going to name this my cube material, because it's going to go on a cube. All right. Now, in terms of this material, you'll see here's the sample, what it looks like, and here again are some of its attributes. So let's say, for example, I want to change the color of this. You know, again, it's gray right now. What I'm going to do is go to this little gray section here, and this is our color sampler, basically. And if I click on that with the left mouse button, it opens up the color history. And the color history allows me to choose different colors. So let's say I wanted to make my cube green. I could choose green, and it would give me a color. If I don't like that particular shade, I can come down here and make adjustments to the color by dragging with the left mouse button. I can make it more vibrant or more pale, depending on the color I want. I can also make it more rich or less so, or light and dark. This is my tint or my value. So I can figure out what color green I want. And I like that one. If you want, you can also make adjustments to the color by sort of driving around on this color wheel. Find the basic color you want, and then add darkness or tint to it to kind of change the color around until you get the color you want. Once you arrive at the color you want, you can just click off into space, and that gives you that new color. So let's say I have this cube, and I'd like to make it made out of that material. Here comes the next step towards applying a material to an object. So I'm here in the Hypershade, and I can see my material. Now there are many ways to apply the material. This is one of them. If I go over the material in the Hypershade, in the browser, hold down the middle mouse button, I get that green plus of power that we saw in the hypergraph hierarchy. And I can just drag that material, holding the button down, and let go. Now this cube is made of that material. I could also, if I wanted to, hover my cursor over, select the cube, and hover my cursor over the material, hold down the right mouse button, and you'll see Assign Material to Selection as an option. This will also make this object out of that material. Does that make sense? This is assigning color by object. So I'm making the whole object made out of this new material that I made. But let's say I want to make one of the faces of this object a different color, right? I don't want the whole thing to look like that. I want to add some variety to it. So what I can do is make another material. Again, click on, go to the Create, make another material. And I could call this Cube Material 2. And I'm going to make this material yellow in color. So now what I can do is select one face of my cube and then hover my cursor over the material in the browser. Hold down the right mouse button, Assign to Selection. And now just that one face is made of the yellow, while the other parts are made of the pink or the purple. So the limitation is the edge flow of the model. So let's say, for example, I wanted to make a small yellow square in the middle of this face. I could do an extrusion, make a smaller face inside of a larger face, select that face, assign that color. So really the only limitation to where I assign color to the material is the edge flow of the model. I'd like you to think of it like a stained glass window, right? There's strips of lead that make the different designs, and then you put the colored glass into the little areas and then melt it so that it fills it in. So wherever the edges are, that lead material, that outlines where the detail is going to be. Does that make sense? So you can apply it anywhere.
I have two questions.
That's fine.
First question.
No limit on questions.
When you're naming your materials, you're lowercasing the word cube and then capitalizing the material. Is there like a specific reason for that?
Absolutely, because it's easier to read. If I don't use an underscore to differentiate between words, I use, again, one word and then capitalize the first letter of the next word so that it's easier to read. Because the bottom line is, I'm not the only person who's going to look at this file. There could be 100 people working on this file, and I want them to know what I'm talking about. Does that make sense? Clarity leads to understanding, and understanding means speed of execution. Does that make sense? So if I can do anything to help someone else do their job better or faster, I'm going to do that. Because otherwise, I'm the one who's slowing us all down. And believe me, that goes around if you're the one who's slowing stuff down. You don't want to be that guy. Okay?
And then also, is there certain instances where instead of making a certain face a different material, you might just want to make another object there? Like when you smooth it, could you run into problems or maybe when you're adding faces where your color instead of being a perfect square in there, it'll be stretched or whatever. So
If the shape of the face changes, then the design will change, yes.
So is that a certain case where maybe you just want to make like a plane or a cube on its own, make that its own material, maintain the shape?
I see where you're kind of going with it, but typically, well, here's what I'll say to preface the whole thing. This is not texturing. This is not at all how we texture. we do create new materials, and we do assign texture information to the color channel of material in order for it to appear on a piece of geometry. So that's definitely a thing. But this is not how we actually texture objects. What I'm doing here is showing you that we can color geometry and showing you how the edge flow affects the way the materials are applied, because the next thing we're going to talk about is how do we get into texturing. And these are sort of the baby steps that lead to that. Does that make sense? Now, in terms of trying to create texture for a model, again, it's a whole other process that we haven't even gone into yet. But it starts with this idea. But where is this useful? In a lot of instances, while I'm modeling, I will create materials and assign them to the thing that I'm building, because it makes it easier for me to look at the object. When everything is sort of that dull gray material, it is very boring to look at. It's not very exciting. And I can't really see detail, because if everything is Lambert and on top of each other, it tends to flatten the whole thing. Does that make sense? So I can apply different materials and different colors to the different pieces, and then it really starts to look more like the thing I'm building, and it makes me more excited. And I can also see the detail a little bit better.
Do some programs like the Substance Painter, where you have different materials where it automatically assigns like textures, so if you do like different materials in order for the assignment to work on stuff like that? Or is that
Well,
different?
Substance Painter, it's an application that allows you to generate textures for things. Works on the same premise that you create materials, and it has certain parameters that determine how those materials are assigned and how those details are assigned to each specific object. And you can select individual faces and put different materials on those. That's a thing. And you can take that same material and apply it to a different object, but you would then adjust the parameters of it, because the different pieces of the same object are different sizes and proportions, and therefore you might not like the same algorithms to affect the texture and the way it's applied to that particular piece of the object as compared to another piece. For example, if I'm going to apply a texture of chipped paint to the side of a vehicle, it's going to have the same material as one of the rivets on that vehicle. But I'm not going to have the exact same technical parameters for both, because that rivet is way smaller. Does that make sense? So the algorithms that determine how the texture behaves are going to be different. Does that make sense? Okay. It's a good question, and probably scared the heck out of all the rest of you guys. But the good news is you will get into that shortly. Actually, not this class, but soon thereafter. There's a lot of super fun applications that help you apply textures. But there's always a thought process, and there's always a series of algorithms or mathematical formulas that help the applications figure out how to do what you want them to do. And that's why it's very important you understand how they think and work, because then you can get what you want out of them. And it's less of, well, I hope it does what I want. You press a button and hope. But so here's what I would like for you guys to do. With this newfound knowledge, I want you to open up your toolbox exercise. Remember this guy? Boop. And what I want you to do is color up, make another example, here's your reference, make another version of this thing here, and color it up. Now, you will notice if you go to the Hypershade, that I've already got some materials in there, but those are my materials. I want you to make your own. So, create materials, and when you create those materials, name them. Purple material, color them, make them whatever color you want, and then apply those materials to the various objects. And what I want you to do is try to color this thing up, do your own little cute color scheme, and then I'd really like you to pick some faces of the object and apply a different material so that part of the object is one material and part is the other, because I'd like to see that you can assign by face. And again, in terms of fun little attributes you can make adjustments to, I just want to point out transparency. That's what makes materials somewhat or completely transparent. Is that how you do Windows? Yes, it is. That's one way. So what I want you to do is play with some of these materials, create some colors, assign it to the geometry, and show me what you figured out how to do. And Brian and I will walk around and make sure that you guys are all getting this idea and how it works. Yep, that's bulletproof. You're not supposed to be able to select that. You got to make your own. Yeah, just recreate those shapes, and then try to color them to make your own groovy designs. Oh, look at that. Yeah, it can be. Yeah. No, that's fine. You made a happy sphere. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You have to grab the faces you want to make a different color. So you got to go to face mode, grab the faces you want. All right, and then put your cursor over the material that you want to change it to in the browser. Hold down the right mouse button and choose Assign to Selected. So grab the faces again. Yep. Yeah. Now those faces are made of that material. So you can have some faces made of one material and some faces made of another material. Good. Have you had a chance to make good use of the online help sessions? The Google Hangouts?
I was at home all day yesterday.
Oh, okay. All right.
Everybody asks that question.
Having fun? Let's find Lambert in that list. Oh, very funky. I like that one. Yes.
So I am getting those, like, combined. I don't know how to put this thing now.
Oh, just grab the tab and yank it. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that function that they've built into Maya. Somebody must like it. I'm not on that list. Very cool. All right, I'm liking what I'm seeing. Looks like you guys have gotten the handle on this. Yes. That's okay. Just go to Window, Browser. There it is. Just drag it near it. There, and then let go. All right, just drag it up there, let go. There you go. Yep, now it's back in. All right, so it looks like you guys have got a pretty good handle on this. That's good. Like I said, this is baby steps towards texturing, so remember all of this stuff because it's going to lead to something else fun and exciting. All right, so let us then get to our skill check for today. So our skill check for today is to determine how well you understood materials and creation and application of such, because what we're going to do is color the zombie kill bus. So now that you've set up a hierarchy for it and it's totally functional, now we're going to color that bad boy up and get a really fun looking design out of it. Now, in terms of the zombie kill bus, I want to make sure you at least create one material, color that material, and apply it to the bus. So technically you could make one material, make it hot pink, and then make the whole bus hot pink and you'd be fine. But I do recommend have some fun with it. Color this thing up. You can make the windows transparent. You can, even if you need to, change the edge flow of the model a little bit. You know, use the multi-cut to create design elements, and you can color those parts. Just to give you an idea of some of the things that you can do, let me open up a zombie kill bus file for you. I have a couple of cool ones that I think you might like. Where's my zombie kill bus? It should be in there. All right. Let's do here's a good one. I really like this one. Zoinks! Zoinks!
They finally had it with running.
But anyway, that one was pretty cool. I really like the hubcaps. That was awesome. But, you know, obviously they made some adjustments to the zombie kill bus in order to be able to add that coloration to it. And let me see. I think this is another good one. There we go. Now that's an angry kill bus. Yeah, I'm not sure who that thing is supposed to be killing. I'm just hoping I'm on the inside when it all rambles down the road. But point being, no pun intended, apply some colors. Have some fun with this. It's actually a pretty fun little exercise. It does not take that long. And the more you play with it, obviously, the better understanding of the material you will have. So feel free to trick it out. And there's a discussion. I have to actually adjust the date of when the discussion is due. I have to switch it till after this point. Obviously, I believe I'll make it the 8th for the December month. But I would love for you guys to do a little screen grab and post that image on there so that your fellow classmates can see the cool stuff that you've made and then comment on each other's stuff. You have to post and give somebody else feedback on theirs in order to get credit for the discussion. So make sure you do both of those things. And in terms of getting a screen grab, it couldn't be more simple. You can either do Command-Shift-4, which gives you this sort of, it looks like a crosshair thing, and then you move it to the corner of the screen and you drag with the left mouse button and it makes a picture. and then it takes that picture and it sticks it right on your desktop, and you can post that. Or if that whole aspect scares you too much, you can do Command-Shift-3, and it basically prints your entire screen. Also totally fine because I can see what you've done. But do me a favor, if you're going to print the whole screen, try to maximize the size of the window so that the bus dominates more of the image. It's all about pixels, so you want as many in there as you can get. So make sure you're creating an image and putting it in there for everybody to see and comment on, and share your design ideas. Command-Shift-4 gives you the little target, and then you bring that to the corner and drag with the left mouse button, and when you let go, it takes a picture. It actually makes that noise too if your sound is on. Or you can do Command-Shift-3 and it does the whole screen. So your choice, it doesn't matter. But what I want to see is your great design idea and post it up there. So, and like I said, I want you to post your bus and give somebody feedback on theirs in terms of their texture. And then that will successfully complete the discussion on the posting of your zombie kill bus. Because I'd like you guys to see each other's work. You know, this is an opportunity to show people what you figured out. And I think it's pretty cool. I love the designs. There's always something interesting. All right. Any questions about the skill check? Any questions at all? Any questions about the materials and the application of such? All the way in the back. Can you add stuff to the bus? I would say to a certain degree, yes. I don't want you to go too crazy. Like if you look, oh, I closed it down. If you looked at that bus that I had up there, there was some stuff definitely added on. I would say as long as you are not adding more than like 30% onto it, that's fine. I don't want you to get totally distracted and decide to build a helicarrier and build the bus as an accessory to the helicarrier. But if you want to build an accessory to the bus, that's fine. Does that make sense in terms of its allotment? I don't want you to build more than 30% on what's already there, because your time is valuable. You guys, you don't have much time, and what little time you own, you should be spending on stuff that's worth more of your grade. You know, and that's just being smart. Kind of like the idea that if you have several assets to build, and one of them is a hero asset or an asset that is in the front and the foreground of whatever scene it is you're building for, you're going to spend way more time on that than the lamp that's in the background. So you have to be smart about how you allot your time. But that's a great question. Thank you. Yes?
Coloring the bus, can you use a color ramp?
Who?
The ramp material?
I would rather you didn't use the ramp just because I didn't go into that. I'd like to keep everybody on the same playing field. Does that make sense? I try to do that wherever I can, because some people know how ramps work and some don't, and I don't want somebody to look at your bus and go, oh, his looks cool because he knows how to do some stuff I don't know yet. My bus is awful and will never be as good as his. But if you guys are all doing the same thing, someone can look at your bus and go, wow, with the exact same rules, look what he did. Does that make sense? That gives you a bar, because what that is skill. That's not, I know more than you about this. And I try to do that with all of you guys' assignments. You know, I don't let you do things that I don't let other people do. Everybody does it or nobody does it. And it's much safer that way, kind of like weight classes or age classes with like football or something. You know, if you're way out of your class, you're going to hurt somebody or somebody's going to hurt you. So in the interest of safety and fair play, yeah, everybody on the same field. It's a good question, though. Thank you for asking. Anything else? Oh, and of course, obviously, everything needs to be Lambert, so don't make anything shiny. Everything Lambert for this class, always. All righty. Anything else? Are we good? All right. Lecture 6 going once. Lecture 6 going twice. Yeah. It's always on twice. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, okay. And incidentally, a lot of times after we finish lecture, like 9 of you rush my desk and ask me questions. These are questions you should be asking while we're all out and about here because they're good questions and your fellow classmates will learn from them. So don't be shy. Go ahead and ask when you have the opportunity to do so because everybody wins when you ask a question. I promise you that. Everybody wins. Going once. Oh.
Okay, real quick, how do you assign my object again instead of having to
Middle mouse button drag or select the object and hover your cursor over the material, hold down the right mouse button and choose assign to selection. Yep, either one of those will work. And there's a bunch of other ways to do it too, but those are the two I'd like you guys to concentrate on because they lend to themselves to other things I want to talk about and they build off of some things that we've already talked about. So just an easier transition. All right, lecture 6 going once. Lecture 6 going twice. Lecture 6 sold. 1712. All righty, guys, thank you very much. I'll see you on Friday, and we will talk about some more exciting stuff on our path careening towards textures. And we will discuss this Sunday's lectures, which will be an online environment. We're going to be doing that online on Sunday, but more details on Friday. Make sure you sign the sign-in sheet if you've not done so already.